Hello, this is a demo of the test assignment for the DOCOsoft company. In scope of this test, we need to create a web API project to handle user records in order to create, update, get and delete user data. We need to use database, solid principles, tests, and basically that's it. So the code is populated here on the GitHub in the README. You can see that we need, in order to run this test application, we need to create empty database. In my case, database already exists. Then fix connection in the application settings file and run the database migration from the PowerShell. So let me start Visual Studio with project opened. In the application settings, I already have my own configuration string, connection string to the database. So what I need is just to update the database with the latest schema. In the persistence project, it's important. Okay, we have database created. Let me check. Tables. We have only one users table, and during database creation, I also created one record just for demo purposes. Okay. Now, in order to test the complete project, just to make sure that everything works, we can go to the tests. I have only one set of tests for user controller, and if we run all, we will see that 4 tests for create, update, delete and get user works correctly. Details about test will be provided later in this demo. Okay, so now back to the project. As already mentioned, we have only one user controller, and this user controller is responsible for providing methods to get all users, get single user, create user, update user and delete user. If we run API project, we will see Swagger UI for all methods. Get, it's possible to execute this one in order to see my test user in the database. Same works for get one, for creating user, for updating user, for getting single user by user ID, and for removing user. Okay, now whole project is built with column query segregation responsibility pattern in mind. For that, we have a user controller responsible only for sending queries or sending commands to the application routine. User's controller built with a mediator pattern, so we just instantiate an object and send this object to our mediator. Then this one responsible for execution corresponding methods. Let's check, for example, get users query. So this is get all users. It creates get user. Get all users responsible for creating get users list query. All application logic inside the application project here. We have a features folder with the users and with separation between commands and queries. For example, for get all users or for get users list, we have a specific query. This is just an empty query. Then we have this query handler, which is responsible for getting all users using the repository. repository created in the separate project in the persistence. This is just a simple database context and users repository with normal create, read, update operations described in the base repository. So in the base one we can get one, get all, add, update and delete. I do persist changes to the database context inside the repository. This is what I decided during the designing of the application. Now the same goes for commands. For commands we have create user command, delete user command and update user command. For example, let's check handler for the create user command. Here it is. As the first thing, we validate our command, and command validation is here close to the user create feature. For example, with checking just for an empty or just for property length, I also implemented for demo purpose validation for user email to be unique, and for that I use repository and method inside the repository in order to check if we already have the same email somewhere in the database. Okay, so in the command handler we checked our user command, create user command. If it's okay, then we using automapper create our domain entity and execute a repository method with the domain entity. Okay, delete user is a bit simpler. We just check if user exists, and if it does, then we delete. If not, we just throw an exception. Same for update user. We have update user command with a validation and with a handler. Inside the handler we get a user from the database, then we apply modified fields in automapper, and finally we update user and return what do we return? 204 probably from the controller. Update user. Yep, we send no content for user update and for user delete operations. Okay, as part of the test assignment we mentioned we need to test. For the testing I decided to not use unit testing. Instead I've created integration tests, and integration tests are executed in the in-memory snippets of the user's database. So we don't touch SQL database, we use in-memory one. So this pure integration test. We test whole application logic with SQL commands, but against in-memory database with expected data set in it. So if we open user controller tests, we have a couple here. While creating a test feature, we register in-memory database and then apply all the logic for in-memory database as we have for the real one on a SQL server. Now, once again, during the creation in-memory database, we also create well-known user just to have something what we expect to have in the database. Now, for getting or find or for getting user information, we execute API request against API users. Then we read in response and compare that we have well-known user in the result set. For the create user test, we define object or user we expect to be created. Then we create user with a post action. Then we get the user with a returned user ID, and we check that email is the same as we sent for creation. Update user test works almost the same. We are creating new user with a post action. Then we get user ID after creation, and we create new command for update user, and we update newly created user, and then we check after the getting updated user, we check that we have email changed with the expected one. Delete user also creates user and deletes a user, then gets all users in order to see that we do not have user with expected email. So if we run all the tests once again, we will execute all SQL operations in the in-memory set, and we test that everything works fine. That's all for the demo. Thank you so much.